When I first started really getting into making my own music, I distinctly remember watching a video of Trent Reznor using a plugin on a laptop called Guitar Rig. And I thought to myself, I have Guitar Rig, so does this mean that it's okay for me to use the stuff that I already have and not just constantly try to acquire more and more stuff? And this seems like something that should be obvious to us from the start. But for me, it was certainly not the case because I was watching all of these videos of people doing studio tours and seeing all of these expensive synthesizers that I really wanted to own, and thinking, well, I can't really make what I want to make until I have that stuff. So seeing that video was a moment of permission to just start experimenting and using what I already have, which, by the way, if you have a laptop and some plugins, then you have far more powerful tools than people had even 10 or 15 years ago. So I got this comment on a video recently, and it really made me think about all of this stuff. Back then I was mostly making gear-oriented videos, reviews of synthesizers and things like that, because it was the only thing I could think of to do at the time. And prior to that, I had just been making music and releasing it into the world with whatever I had at my disposal, and had gathered a little bit of a modest following doing that. So, I'm not a worldwide name, even still, but there are fans of mine who follow my music and listen to everything I put out, and I'm incredibly grateful for those of you who are fans. But this weird thing started to happen as soon as I started allowing people to visually see and make judgments with their eyes what I was making that music with, because I was sitting in my attic, in my home, in the middle of Mississippi, middle of nowhere, making stuff with cheap synthesizers for the most part, and of course, as this gentleman pointed out, cheap foam stuck to the walls, cheap speakers, cheap everything. And yet, when people just listened to my music, because I tinkered with it a lot and got it to sound at least characterful, if not good and well produced, this never came up. So why is that? Because they never would have known that I was doing stuff wrong if I hadn't let them see and judge it with their eyes and through their misconceptions of what it takes to make music. And again, I was right there with all of those people because I would watch videos of my favorite artist give studio tours and think if I had those synthesizers and those microphones, I could make what I actually want to make. And the thing is, those people, generally speaking, didn't get to where they are, which is, us knowing about them, by having the most expensive gear. They probably started using stuff that they had already. That's how all of us start. And a lot of those breakthrough albums and breakthrough pieces of music that people made were made in less than ideal conditions, with less than ideal equipment. Because an artist is going to find a way to be creative, regardless of what they have at their disposal. In fact, there's something to be said for having fewer choices and that forcing you to be more resourceful with those limited resources. This also made me think back to one of my favorite composers, Olivier Messiaen, and the fact that he wrote one of his most famous pieces, the Quartet for the End of Time, in a German prison camp during World War II. And his fellow inmates played clarinet, violin, cello, and Messiaen himself was a pianist and organist. So guess what ensemble he wrote his little chamber piece for? What he had. There are even rumors that he chose certain harmonies and chord voicings on the piano specifically because there were certain notes that were out on the prison camp piano. I don't know what kind of prison camp this was, clearly not the most hardcore if they were allowing chamber music concerts, but still. And it's an incredible piece of art. There are some movements in there that are some of my favorite pieces of music ever. And it was born out of these very limiting conditions. And I'm really glad that Messiaen didn't say, well, I've got this great idea for something, but I'm going to wait until I get back home to my studio where I have a piano that all of the keys work on. So I think this ties just mainly into consumerism today in the music space, and the fact that we think we can buy our way into inspiration and creativity And that's just not the case. If I just had blank, then I could finally do blank. And so we either sit around and wait and never start, or we buy that thing and then we're frustrated with the fact that we still don't know how to use it to express ourselves. And a lot of times the more we acquire, the more overwhelmed we get, because then we have too many choices and we don't know how to focus our creativity. And that has certainly happened to me over the years when I've found myself with too many choices, too many options. And when I do that, I try to just focus on one thing at a time and go deeper instead of just feeling like I'm sort of skimming across the surface of a lot of stuff. And this was a major obstacle for me when I first got into music technology about 10 years ago. When I would write for piano, my solo instrument that I was very familiar with, I felt very focused. I knew exactly how to get what I wanted out of it. I had spent decades learning how to play the thing, and I knew its limitations really well. And those limitations forced me to be creative and to go really deep. And my piano pieces, even to this day, I feel like is some of my best writing because it's very, very focused. But once I downloaded Cubase and started being able to add more tracks, more instruments, more virtual instruments, more plugins, that's when things got really crowded and really unfocused for me. It's the same with hardware synthesizers. When I had just a Korg MS-20 Mini, my first synth, I got everything I could out of that thing. I would sample it and play it polyphonically. I would use it for percussion and things that it wasn't supposed to be used for. And that forced me to get really creative with that limited tool. But now that I have a lot of options, sometimes I come in here and just sit and stare at them thinking, how can I figure out how to use all of these things at once? And I don't need to use all of these things at once. I need to pick something and go deeper into that thing. So it's easy to have constraints when you have no resources, like me in the early days. I didn't have any equipment, so I just had to make do with what I had. But you have to be intentional and sort of force those limitations on yourself to be focused and creative once you have things to choose from. This applies compositionally too, and it's why I talk so often about limit yourself to just 2 or 3 parts and see what you can explore harmonically that way, and it will force you to come up with solutions to that very unique set of problems that you've created for yourself. Creativity is puzzle solving. If we create or invent a puzzle, we have something to solve for, and we have to get really creative to do it. By the way, this is exactly what I've been doing with my Composition Clarity cohort, which is going on right now, and we're having an incredible time just exploring small moves and things that we typically might skip over. Small moves that we can make that will have a huge impact in our chord progressions and our melodies and how we put pieces of music together, arrangement. And what keeps coming up with everyone is, wow, the prompts that you give are so restrictive. I thought that I was gonna, want to break the rules, but I actually found more inspiration by adhering to those limitations and digging around and trying to find creative solutions to those intentional problems. By the way, I'm going to host a free live workshop. If you would like to see a little taste of what I'm talking about here, I will show you exactly how to use one of these prompts in real time, and we'll work through it together. That's free to attend, and you can claim your spot by signing up in the link below. So the real takeaway here is don't sit around and wait until you have a bunch of stuff or a bunch of theory knowledge or a bunch of whatever you feel like you need to get started. You learn by getting started and figuring things out and being creative with the limited resources that you have. That's it. I bet that there are a lot more possibilities there to explore than you might think. So that initial comment that I got that kind of sparked me wanting to make this video, about cheap foam being glued to the wall. I originally typed out something a little snarky, but he seemed to be fairly lighthearted and he didn't mean anything malicious by it like some YouTube comments do. So I quickly deleted my snarky response and thought, well, what could I say to this person that might actually be helpful? Don't let anything stop you from making something you think is cool. Because if I had waited for conditions to be perfect for me to start making and releasing my own music and expressing what I wanted to say as an artist, I would still be waiting. You would not be looking at me right now. You would not know who I am. No one would know who I am. I would be sitting here thinking, oh, one day I'll be able to afford that microphone that's going to allow me to record my piano and have it sound as good as Tony Anderson's piano, you know. But I didn't do that, and I'm very thankful that I didn't. I figured out ways to use what I already had, and they were not perfect. Those early recordings were not perfect, but I look at them very fondly because they are filled with character, and they are filled with me trying and learning and doing the very best with what I had at the time. Making and releasing music and making and releasing these YouTube videos, those two things have changed my life. I can't emphasize that enough. They have changed my life. Well, I shouldn't say I didn't wait, because I did put off actually speaking on YouTube and trying at, making this channel something that's helpful for other people for too long, and that's one of the only regrets that I do have. So if I can save anyone or give you permission, I know you can do whatever you want, but I needed that permission from seeing Trent Reznor use a tool that I already had sitting in my DAW. I needed that sense of permission that it was okay for me to just go and try things. So whoever needs to hear this today, I felt like I needed to say it, because if I had waited for the perfect conditions, I still would be waiting. Never wait for things to be perfect. Nothing will ever be perfect. Something will always come up, life will happen. Things will not go the way that you planned them to go. The music community is filled with people who make excuses. If you can learn to use your limitations as a tool and not as an excuse, that is going to separate you from 97% of people who just watch YouTube videos and complain in the comment sections and are never going to do anything because they feel like everything is someone else's fault, and they are not going to start until things are perfect for them. Things are never going to be perfect for them. So for those who need to hear it and those who are willing to be receptive of the message, just start with what you have and never let anything stop you from making something that you think is cool. Just a reminder, you can sign up for that free composition workshop in the link down below if you would like to come to that on October 6th. Might start doing those like monthly or something as well, for those of you who can't attend that first one. And if you'd like to see me actually practice what I preach, I made a video recently where I made an entire track, an entire piece of music with just one plugin, which I happen to help design. If you'd like to watch that, it's going to be linked right here. See you soon.